Praeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashuki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Nigama Kaparur Garitam Param Shukam Karamita Javi Samitam Pibata Bhagavatam Rashamayam Mahora Horasikum Vivakam Krishna Swadamapagate Dharmagini Kadonasta Dvisamasho Paranako Dinodidam Twamapi Adavashuta Vishutam Bibu Samapiri and Ebidam Biduxaram Prakyahi Dohormahoraditam Sanglation Urbanum Usanti Nanyataham Atmaramastamune Nagranti Korbanti at Pinitam Buddha Ganahari Anarto Pashamam Shakshad Bhakti Yogam Lokasajana Chakra Satpada Samitam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pango Mama Mandir Matergati Matsavasha Padambo Jadhadana Madana Mohanum Seaman Rasarasaram Vivam Sivara Karsan Venus and Urbako Gopinata Sri Sunaham Divyadvindaranya Kalpadvamada Srimad Radnakara Shima Shanishto Sri Radha Shila Govinda Prasalavi Sevamanushmanami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Chajigari Taya Krishnaya Govinaya Namo Namaha Mangalam Bhagavan Vishnu Mangalam Guru Jaja Mangalam Bharati Kaksha Mangalaya Tanohari Om Narayanaya Vidmahi Vasudevaya Dimahi Tano Vishnu Prachodhyate Om Mahagadi Chavidmahi Vishnu Padni Chadimi Tano Lakshmi Prachodhyate Mahalakshmi Namastubhyam Saraswati Hari Priya Namastubhyam Namaste Vadyazinu Tapti Kanchana Gonagi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanasute Devi Pramani Hari Priya Nama Om Vishnu Paraya Krishna Vistaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhakti Vraja Shami Tinam Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nivishesa Sanivadi Praskidati Sata Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Well, Brent's back with us after a four-way with a very fruitful, I'm sure, foray with Radhika Raman, who gave a Bhagavatam class yesterday morning. And Natasha, good morning, Natasha. Larry, nice to have you on board. And Rob, here over to my right as I sit facing my laptop computer here on Zoom. Something significant happened yesterday, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, our Joshua is having a birthday on Friday, so anybody who's inclined, welcome to come down to Spanish Fork around 7 o'clock. We'll have something so a cake for him and some treats and do a little kirtan and some music, that'll be for Joshua, the trash hero of the Festival of Colors. Such a nice, humble, hardworking devotee. He has everybody's respect and admiration. Actually, I've invited him. I haven't got confirmation. I mentioned to him at the Sunday feast, and he seemed positively disposed. But I'll have to get back to you as to whether he actually accepts my invitation. His family may have collared him for something else, but we'll see. Tentatively, Friday night, 7 o'clock. In any case, we do have the gathering on Friday nights at 7 o'clock for kirtan, for light refreshments, and for rap music as well. We're out of the 28 prayers of Gajendra, we're on the fourth prayer. It's taken us 10 or 15 sessions to get to the fourth prayer. And before that, in terms of setting the scene, giving an overview, took us over 90 different segments. So we're doing this very meticulously. We're churning the drops of nectar that have to do with Gajendra Lila. And when you think of this as just being one amongst dozens and dozens of pastimes, any one of which you could easily spend 100, 200 sessions on, it's humbling. It's humbling. You know why great saints and sages have said that even though such great luminaries as Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, Jiva Goswami, they've written hundreds and hundreds of books, they've articulated millions of words about the science of devotional service. You understand why after all of that, they can say, I've only gathered one grain of sand on the beach, one drop of water from the ocean. There are no limits. Gunatmanas tebi gunamtami tabanesha kadanyava upamsipe miyaka diabhusha. Lord is described amongst the many names glorifying the Lord. One name is Gunatma, means you'll never come to the end of his qualities. You'll never come to the end of his glories, nor those of his devotees. Krishna is like a jewel, which Prabhupada says is not particularly beautiful, but when the jewel is in a setting and it's surrounded, it's in the middle with a setting of other less precious jewels, but the two complement each other. The most valuable jewel becomes more beautiful, more attractive when the lesser valuable jewels surround it like a constellation. So Krishna is never in a vacuum. He's never alone. I remember in the early days, there was a story of a devotee who had found a picture of Krishna in a curiosity shop. It was a picture of Krishna standing on the earth. The earth was a globe, and Krishna was standing on the earth with his flute. And it conveyed the impression that Krishna is in control of the earth. Krishna is a Lord and Master. But Prabhupada did not particularly cotton to that picture because he said Krishna was alone. He preferred pictures of Krishna with the cows, Krishna with the elderly mothers of Vrindavan, or with the cowherd girls or the cowherd boys, or fighting some demon. Krishna is always seen in society, in company. Any influential person, take the president of the United States, he's never alone, never walking down Pennsylvania Avenue with a bunch of quarters in his pocket and his laundry bag over his shoulder. He has duties of a higher nature to discharge. And so he has servants do his laundry and iron his shirts for him, make sure his clothes are laid out, tastefully arranged and chosen for the next day. He has secretaries, he has bodyguards, he has cabinet ministers. You'll never find a super powerful person knocking about on their own. They're always surrounded by an entourage. So the most powerful, the omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead, is not to be depicted in a vacuum alone. He's Krishna. Krishna is, Prabhupada, in naming the flagship magazine for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he said, back to Godhead, not back. Someone said, why not back to God? Prabhupada said, because God is not alone. God's not living in a vacuum. God means God and his energies. It's like when you say the sun, you don't think just of the sun. When you say the sun, you don't think just of the sun, but you think of the sunshine. You can't separate. You can't think of the sun and not think of the sunshine. You can't think of the sunshine and not think of the sun. Similarly, you cannot think of Krishna as being divorced from his devotees and from his creation. So here we come to the fourth verse. That translation of this is the Supreme Personality of God, and these are the words of Gajendra, as he's both praying to the Lord for safety, for protection, and he's also in the process of reviving his consciousness of a previous life as a devotee. He's transferring his trust and his faith into the Lord. He's releasing tension. He's releasing the stress and the anxiety that comes from misidentifying with this body. Altogether, he's getting from a very bad place into a really, really good place. And we can sort of track this transition through the verses that he utters as he's tendering the lotus flower up aloof to the Lord in the heights, and reciting his prayers. And these prayers were actually composed by him in a previous lifetime. So he's getting good recall. He's getting a robust level of recall from his previous life. And all of the progress that he made in the past comes rushing to the forefront. So here's the translation of Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, by expanding his own energy, keeps this cosmic manifestation visible, and again sometimes renders it renders it invisible. He is both the supreme cause and the supreme result, the observer and the witness in all circumstances. Thus, he is transcendental to everything. May that supreme personality of Godhead offer me protection. And because our tendency during these sessions is to contemporize a lot of these verses and thoughts and render them into poetic verse, let me share this with you and comment as we go along. Okay. Another more perhaps contemporary way of putting the truths of that verse, the reason, the result, the start and end. Krishna is the reason that this cosmic manifestation comes about. He provides it as an accommodation for the souls that want to be independent of God and therefore cannot remain in the kingdom of God. They cannot any longer remain in God's home because they want their own situation. They want their own family. They want their own followers. They want their own money to spend. They want their own turf. And so they can no longer be on God's turf. So the Krishna is the reason this material world is created, not the primary reason. He would rather we stay with him. But because we don't want to stay with him, therefore, we require an alternative world. So Krishna provides that. And therefore, Krishna is described as the reason. He's called the result. Of course, the ingredients of this material world emanate from his separated material energies, earth, air, fire, water, mind, intelligence, false ego. When it's time to create the world, he creates it from himself. There's an ancient hymn called the Purusha Sukta, which is chanted, and it describes how the material apparition, the Vishwarupa, the universal form of the Lord, comes from the spiritual form of the Lord himself. Sahasra Sirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapade Sabamam Vishuddhi Chadishta Purisheviram Sarvam Yakspudam Yaksubhavyam Natamrita Disheshin Yadintara Edavaneshya Mahya Tojigam Sha Purusha Parusha Vishwari Triparusha Vidamaram describes how the trees, the forests are the hairs on God's head. The upper planets are his head. The middle planets are his shoulders. The lower planets are his feet. He's wind, he's fire, he's air. He's the offering. He's the recipient of the offerings. He's the sacrifice. He's the butter that flows into the sacrifice. Pretty much this ancient prayer describes how everything emanates from God. He's the start. He's the end. When he desires it, the whole world will be wound up and annihilated. He sees everything, he knows everything, and he's also each and every one of our most intimate friend. Bhoktiram yatavasham sarvalokamayashanam suridam gyatmam shantam rishiti suridam sarvabhutanam. He is the enjoyer. He created everything so that he can enjoy it. He enjoys seeing us prosperous. He enjoys seeing the integrity, the forthrightness, the high-mindedness of his devotees. He enjoys it when they make hard decisions for swearing name, fame, and material profit, for swearing the approval of modern culture in favor of following steadfastly the lotus footsteps of the Lord and his devotees. The Lord resonates with all these activities of his devotees. He cheers them on. He's for us. He's in our corner. He's our best friend. And it doesn't hurt us that he's also the creator, the owner of all the different material and spiritual world. He's above the world, just like the sun is above the world. And yet at the same time, the sun is the eye of God. Nothing happens that it's not witnessed by the eye of the sun or the alternative eye of the moon. Either you do something by day or by night. If you do it by day, it's noticed by the sun. If you do it by night, it's noticed by the moon. The sun and the moon are the eyes of God. Therefore, he not only provides the ingredients of this creation, but he witnesses each and every act that goes on, performed by each and every living being, from Lord Brahma down to the insignificant ant. He watches everything as the witness, the overseer, the proprietor, the permitter. He in himself transcends all the limits of matter, the limits of air, the limits of water, the limits of fire, the limits of the mind, the limits of the intelligence, the limits of the false ego. He exists above and beyond his separated material creations. It goes on to say the Alpha, Omega, the reason it spins, all seeing, all knowing, where the power begins. Outside the game, but he knows every play. Transcendental flow. Yeah, he leads the way. With a glance of the Lord, the universe takes form. From cosmic dusk, a world is born. His energy flows. Creation unfurls, but with another glance, the visible world swirls. The cause and effect he's woven within. Every beginning, every end, where we've been. His eyes on the sparrow, his eyes on my soul. Transcendent observer, he knows the whole. Supreme personality, beneath your gaze, I seek your wisdom to walk righteous ways. A glance of protection, a glance of pure grace. May the Lord's light shine upon my face. This is, I think, the third or fourth day we've successfully talked about the transcendental glance of the Lord. We carry out our activities underneath the gaze of the Lord. And if we're averse to serving the Lord, we're averse to putting our life in his hands, getting a better direction, then the gaze of the Lord is like the gaze of a black snake. The mouse is going about his business, and little does he know that hovering over his shoulder is the black snake, and this snake's gaze is fixed intently on the mouse. The mouse has his to-do list, busy picking up the kids from soccer practice, paying the bills at the end of the month, going as a commuter to work on Monday morning. The little mouse has all of his activities, which he deems infinitely important, and yet all the time the gaze of the black snake is fixed on the mouse. And at the pleasure of the black snake, at the time the black snake chooses, he will gobble up that mouse. That's the gaze of the Lord upon those who are averse to pursuing God consciousness. On the other hand, the gaze of the Lord is full of mercy, full of bliss, full of ecstasy. We talked about how after all of her trials and tribulations, Kunti was the recipient of the benign, cryptic almost gaze of the Lord. She considered that that was the perfection, that was the ultimate level of consciousness. Everything she'd gone through, poisoning, house burned, terrible, frightful carnage of the Battle of Kurukshetra, in which an army of 4 million soldiers gathered to oppose and to try to kill her sons. All of these trials and tribulations, she summarized by saying it was a small price to pay to be the recipient, to stand, to bask underneath the benevolent gaze of the Lord. That gaze is the sum total of your mystic powers. Elsewhere, it is also said, Prajarantam Kundalamandanam, that Krishna who has earrings made of crocodiles, Kundalamandanam, Prajarantam Shanasha Shubinam, garlanded with a flower garland, which is surrounded by humming bees. Sonaya Tara Bimba Rasha, his red lips, lips ridden by bimba fruit, with a little bit of pan in his mouth. Pracharanta Shananel Shubisham, with beautiful nostrils, beautiful cheeks, beautiful eyes like lotus flower, and long flowing black hair. Devotee says to come before the Lord and have the Lord notice one and gaze upon the living being fills the devotee with ecstasy. Up until that time, the senses of the conditioned soul are fragmented. We only smell with our nose, we see with our eyes, we hear with our ears, we only touch with our hands. But once being the recipient of the mercy of the Lord, Prahlad got it from the hand of Nrsingadev, Dhruva Maharaj got it from the touch of the conch on his head there. Gajendra is about to receive it also. Kunti received it through the gaze of the Lord. Similarly, Akrura, when he was on his way to meet the Lord in Mathura. He'd been deputed by Kamsa to bring Krishna back to Mathura. Mathura's meditation as he drove the chariot towards Krishna's Dham was that in a few moments, at the end of this journey, when I reach the destination of Braj, Krishna will come out. He will look at me. He will recognize me. And because I'm older from a chronological point of view, he will bow down before me, God, to whom all living beings offer hosannas and alleluias, Hare Krishnas and praises. He will observe the protocol by bowing down before me as his elder uncle. And he will call me by name. And as Akura drives along, anticipates this encounter with the Lord, anticipates being recognized and being seen by the Lord, his hair stands on end and he gets goosebumps on his body. He says, my however long I've been in this material world, however incarnations I've experienced, everything will culminate today when the Lord recognizes me. And then he concludes, he says, those who do not achieve recognition from the Lord, who, not that the Lord turns away from a living being. The Lord never turns away from his parts and parcels. It is we who turn away. It is we who turn our backs on the Lord. And therefore, in a manner of speaking, when we turn our backs on the Lord, we are not recognized by the Lord. The recognition is always there. The Lord knows us. He's within our hearts. But we don't get any of the benefits of being his parts and parcels. We don't get any of the benefits of being his servants because we have disinherited ourselves. We have walked out. We have, not that the Lord has cut us off, but we've cut ourselves off from the Lord. Therefore, Akura says, those who are not recognized by the Lord are just to be pitied. That's all. They're just to be pitied. And it's interesting too, because with recognition, with Krishna in your life, with that dynamic having been awakened, Krishna within the heart, and one begins to open oneself up to the direction, the light of Krishna within the heart, one's whole life changes. One gets more purposeful. There's more meaning. One begins to understand their talents and abilities inside one that one hardly knew that one had. Even with the twilight, the pre-dawn awakening of Krishna consciousness, so many changes take place for the good in one's life, that one who is on the path of Krishna consciousness always shares that Krishna consciousness. It's just part of the process of making advancement that you want to share, tell people what transformations are taking place in your life. Devotee, as one does good to oneself, one automatically wants to do good to others. Therefore, devotees are called oceans of mercies. They're called kind-hearted. So every beginning, every end, it's said in this verse, where we've been, Krishna's eyes are on the sparrow, his eyes are on my soul, he's a transcendental observer. He knows the whole. The refrain, Supreme Personality, beneath your gaze, I seek your wisdom, walk righteous ways. Your glance is a glance of protection, a glance of pure grace. May the Lord's light shine upon my face. This is basically what Gajendra is saying as he offers the Lord the lotus flower to the upper horizon. Krishna's glance, again, comes back again and again and again. It's interwoven into many of the stories. Another example of Krishna's glance killing all unwanted things in our life, especially our attachment for material, temporary sense gratification, which leads to rebirth, is the story of Krishna and the cowherd boys on the occasion when one of Kamsa's demoniac henchmen entered Vrindavan as a huge fat snake named Agasura. That snake lay on the path that the boys usually took, coming and going. Very inert, very quiet, and opened his mouth. His mouth was so big that he seemed to merge and blend into the landscape. you couldn't identify him as a snake because he was just so big in size. So when the Gopas, Krishna's cowherd boyfriends, wandered along on their daily trek here and there, they noticed this new thing on the path. They didn't identify it as a demon whose intention was to kill them. They just thought it was very interesting. And let's be clear that friends of Krishna don't go around fearing every bump in the night, every sound. They know that Krishna is always there. Krishna has protected them in the past, protected them in the present. That protection for Krishna will always be there in the future. So they don't go around timid, cast for milquetoast. They're bold. So when they saw the mouth of Agasura, which is representative of the mouth of Maya, the mouth of Maya. Devotees don't even have to worry about Maya. Maya is the servant, the maidservant of Krishna. If you're in Krishna consciousness, there's nothing bad that Maya can do to you. So without any fear and with a boldness, those gopas thought, no, well, let's explore. It looks like a mountain cave. Let's go in the mountain cave. So they went into the mouth of Agasura, and they didn't get too far before the noxious fumes caused them to lose consciousness, and they all fell down inside the intestines of Agasura, almost as if they were dead. And isn't that what happens to us when we start to identify with matter? We're luminous spirit souls, full of light and love, eternally youthful by nature. We're never subject to birth, death, disease, and old age. But as soon as we want to be independent of Krishna, then we start to key on the external material nature of Krishna and get removed, distance from the internal spiritual nature of which we're a part. And gradually, like an ember, embers are ejected from the fire. And because they're coming from fire, they're full of light and heat. But as they distance themselves from the fire, they become less full of light, less full of heat. And eventually the time that they're away and the distance that they're ejected, they're thrown from the fire, causes them more or less to seem like ashes. The good news is that the ember is still alive, but it's cooling, and it's now lying amongst the ashes, can be revived, but to all intents and purposes, it no longer is exhibiting the symptoms of an eternal spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So it's likened to a dead man. This was the situation of the Gopas, metaphorically, allegorically, analogously. No, it's not allegorical because this actually happened. But the Gopas were playing the role of souls who leave the spiritual atmosphere, being attracted by the cave, the dark cave of Agasura's mouth. Not that they don't have everything they want where they are. Everything's there. You know, Chintamani Pakara Sadmashu Kavariksha Lakshavitishu Saraviyabi Palyantim Lakshmi Saha Sadbrahma Sevimanam Govindamari Purusham Tamam. The abode of the Lord, made of spiritual energy. It's full of sarabi cows, can give you dairy products of any description or any amount. It's full of wish-fulfilling desire trees, can produce anything whatsoever. The stuff of the spiritual world, the internal energy, is chintamani. It can transform anything into valuable jewels. There's no lack in the kingdom of God. So it's not in order to get something more that the gopas are contemplating entering the mouth of the serpent. It's not that anything is missing in the spiritual world. Everything is there in mind-boggling, eternal, unlimited abundance. So why do they then enter into this dark cave? Well, there isn't any really good reason. There's just perversity. You know, we have peacocks here, quite a few actually, with the births in recent years. We have to actually have a sale to reduce the population of peacocks because they're everywhere. If you've ever been around peacocks, if there's any door open, if there's any place they can get themselves into, they will do it. I work behind the temple. There's a big pavilion where we store our wholesale colors, and every day I go in and pack orders, get them ready to be picked up by the FedEx truck, which swings by at 4 o'clock every evening. So there's a sliding door that I go, back and forth through. I always, 100 times a day, I have to make sure that when I go from the pavilion to the office to print out the shipping labels or go to have lunch, I have to always make sure I close the door. Because if I leave that sliding door open, even 18 inches, when I come back, there'll be 10 peacocks in there. They can't resist it. They just, if there's a door, they go in. Then having gone in the many years we've been here, we've lost 2 peacocks in this way. They go in and then they jump up on a big pallet of wholesale boxes of color. And then when something startles them, a noise or a sound or a backfire, they will take off flying from the top of this pallet, maybe 6, 8 feet high. They don't see the glass. They don't see the glass. And they've achieved a pretty high velocity. By the time it's quite a big pavilion. There's many, hundreds, if not thousands of square feet. So they hit that glass, and on 2 occasions, peacocks have broken their necks. And there's no reason why they would go into a pillar. There's no food there. There's no other peacocks. There isn't anything to be gained from them squeezing through the opening that I've forgotten to close, going into that pavilion. But they will do it 100 times out of 100. There's no check. There's no mitigating thought within their mind. What are you going to gain by getting into this pavilion? Is there any gain? Is there any upside? Is there any downside? The answer for anyone who's sober and rational is there's no upside. And there's a huge downside that once in there, you don't know how to get out. Aside from flying against the glass and breaking their necks, even when they're on foot, they don't remember how they got in. You could be shooing them in the direction of the opening, and they just don't get it. They can't retrace their steps. They have very short-term recall. It literally, once they're in there, once they've proceeded 15 or 20 steps they can't remember how they got in. They can't retrace their steps. So when you're trying to shoo them out, it can take 20 minutes, and it's kind of frustrating when you've got a color order to pack by 4 o'clock. That's silly peacocks risking you not being able to get the order packed in time for the pickup. Similarly, why do we come to this material world? Well, there isn't any really good reason. Everything is there in the spiritual world. Everything that you could possibly think of or imagine has already been provided by Krishna for his devotees in the spiritual world. And the best thing is Krishna himself. Krishna is the cynosure of everyone's thoughts, thinking, feeling, and willing. Everything revolves around the transcendent form of Krishna. He's the transcendental autocrat in that spiritual world. In that world, Krishna, 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 Krishna. Why do the gopas go into the cave? Why do we go to the material world? There isn't a good reason. But with the gopas, with the eternally liberated associates of the Lord, there is the thought also that they're prompted to do this in order to enact this pastime, give Krishna the opportunity to show his power. He promises he gives protection to his devotees. So that's what he's going to do, even though it seems like that's all she wrote. They're already in the digestive system of the snake. They're already as if they were dead. It almost seems too late by what we can conceive and predict and comprehend. it would be too late. They're dead. They're in the digestive system of a snake. The snake is monstrous. He's huge. It would seem like there isn't anything Krishna can do. But that's the definition of Krishna. He's not subject to our limitations. He can do things of which we cannot conceive. If we cannot conceive of the Lord being in his own spiritual world beyond this material world, and at the same time, knowing everything, having created everything, having produced everything, entering into everything, if we cannot conceive of the omnipotency of the Lord, of the nature of the Lord, either in his spiritual world or the way that he permeates the material world, then how would we be able to conceive how it is that the Lord acts? He can act beyond our ability to predict or even to comprehend that. What Krishna does is he invokes once again his amazing life-giving glance. He follows. First of all, there's this funny little episode where he comes along a little later after the gopas have already entered the mouth, and the demon has kept his mouth open, hoping that Krishna will come in, because Krishna's the goal. Ultimately, Agasura wants to bring Krishna in along with the cowherd boys. His mission, as given to him, as assigned him by Kamsa, was to kill Krishna. The gopas were just a means. He figured once I've got Krishna devotees, Krishna will not abandon him, that he'll follow. So he's very quiet, he's very inert. His mouth still remains open. And Krishna takes a moment and he thinks, my material energy is so amazing. He appreciates, he's in a state of wonder at his own material energy. And then he says, well, I guess, I'd better go and rescue my devotees. It's after all my promise to do so. So he enters in. He sees where the cowherd boys are lying here and there in the innards of the snake, and he glances at them. By his glance, he does that of which we cannot conceive. He brings them back to life. He restores them just by his glance. Several results are achieved. Number one, he has, first of all, if you backtrack, he's created everything by his glance, both spiritual and material world. His glance destroys ignorance. His glance is like the sun, which penetrates into a dark place. His glance destroys the ignorance by which we suffer in this material world. Thirdly, his glance gives grace, awakens, and enlightens us. Here, Gajendra is in a bad situation. He's in the middle of the water. He's weakened. He's distanced. He's been pulled away from the bank and from anyone who could possibly conceive him, give him help. He's tired. He's discouraged. He's not feeling too good. He's scared. And then it occurs to him, with one last ditch effort, he pulls up the lotus flower and offers. In other words, he does his part. The Lord acts when we act. We have to trigger the Lord. It's not that when the Lord appears, when the Lord saves me, then I'll worship the Lord. No, if that's your attitude, that you're waiting for the Lord to act first, you're going to be waiting for a long time. We have been waiting for a long time. But Gajendra's attitude is, even though it doesn't look good, even though everything seems to have gone against me now for a long time, and remember, it's been 1,000 years since the croc originally scratched his leg. So any hopes or any optimism that he had has long, long ago gone by the wayside. So he's beyond hope. He's at the point where most people would be hopeless. And yet he musters up what little strength he has left, and he gives it over to the Lord. It's often said that when we reach the end of our strength, that's where the Lord's strength begins. So by that act of devotion in dire straits, at the last extremity, Gajendra invoked the grace of the Lord. And in a wink of an eye, once Gajendra did his part, and the Lord was not delinquent, he was not amiss in doing his part. As they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Had Gajendra not, in his extreme circumstances, thought of the Lord and offered the flower to the Lord, small thing, just offer a flower, small thing. But why do we hear Gajendra's story? You can imagine that throughout history, there have been many hundreds and thousands of elephants who have been bitten and eaten by crocodiles. Why are we hearing Gajendra's story? Yeah, it's a small thing to pluck a lotus flower and offer it, but it's an exercise of faith. If you don't have faith, it will never occur to you to invoke the blessings of the Lord. And how many other crocodiles and other living beings, while getting sustenance and hydration at a watering hole, the watering hole is exactly where the predators lurk. The predator's not going to dissipate his energy by going through all the forests and the jungles trying to find prey. Predators have learned an ancient truth: let the prey come to you. Everybody has to drink. We can go 30 days without eating, but you cannot go 3 days without drinking. It makes sense. Predators are going to lurk where there's water. And so there have been many prey, many elephants, many gazelle, many bison, you name it, who have been surprised, ambushed by crocodiles and lions and tigers at watering holes. But why are we not hearing their prayers? Why are we not reading their stories? They were all certainly capable of plucking a flower, a local flower, and offering to the Lord, but it never occurred to them. They had not lived a life of faith. They did not have faith. And so it never occurred to them. And we're reading about Gajendra. Gajendra is glorious for having plucked a flower and offered to the Lord. Exercise faith. The Lord doesn't ask much, but we have to give something. We have to concede our own independence to the Lord before the Lord will come. Imagine a door that only opens inwards. It doesn't open outwards. So if you're going to invite a guest into your house, you have to turn the knob and open the door. It's not constructed in such a way that any guest can come and turn the knob and open the door from the inside out. It can only be opened from the outside in. So you have to come, unlock the door, turn the knob, and then open it up to your guest. Krishna is standing at the door, each and every one of us. And we shouldn't wait until we get to extreme circumstances. If you're not willing to acknowledge and to invite the Lord into your life today, you're not likely to do it at the time of your death. Unless, of course, you happen to have been a pure devotee in your last life, like Gajendra. Gajendra received the grace of the Lord at the critical moment because he asked for it. He asked for it. He opened himself up to the glance of the Lord. And aside from creating everything by his glance and destroying all ignorance, bringing light into darkness by his glance, and giving grace by his glance, Krishna maintains everyone. His glance in this material world is the sun and the moon. During the sun, he glances at everybody and everything through his eye of the sun. And during the night, he glances at everyone and everything in his eye is the moon. So it is the sun and the moon that maintains everything. The moon rays, the moonshine gives nourishment and vitality to the vegetation. It governs the tides of the oceans and all the bodies of waters without which the vegetation wouldn't grow. And the sun gives vitamin D, it gives energy, it gives life. You know, Ayurvedic medicine is based on the healing effects of the sun. Ghee is particularly valued, purified butter, because it's yellow. It actually represents the healing powers of the sun. And so ghee, internally and externally, is a key component in the Ayurvedic process of restoring one back to health. So creating by his glance, destroying ignorance by his glance, giving light by his glance, giving grace by his glance, awakens by his glance, maintaining everyone by his glance, and then finally giving nectar. This is called Amrita Varsha. The eyes of Krishna give nectar, such as they did when they smiled on Kunti, such as they're about to do when they smile on Gajendra, such as they did in the case of Nrsingadev, when he took Prahlad on his lap, stroked him, and smiled at him. Krishna claims every living being as his parts and parcels, and there's nothing that pleases the Lord than to see his children take shelter of him. When a child gets into trouble, he doesn't call the police. He doesn't rely on his own skills. Child immediately runs to the father, runs to the mother. And the father and the mother get so much pleasure out of seeing the little child. Whenever there's anything that causes them apprehension or anxiety or anything that of which they're afraid, the child immediately doesn't go to the uncle, doesn't go to the brother, doesn't go to the sister so much as it goes to the father and the mother, and how the father and the mother enjoys that. They have created that child. It's from their seed that that child has come about. And so similarly, aham bija pradavita, it is from that seed, it is from the glance that, by which Krishna impregnated the seeds of the living entities in 8,400,000 species of life that were all coming. So Gajendra says, Krishna, this is all coming from you. And we are all dependent upon you, and we are all created from you, and we are all connected from you. So right now, I am running to you and to none others. There are demigods in the area. There are demigods watching. They've been watching for 1,000 years as Gajendra struggled with the crocodile. Neither the demigods offered to intervene, neither Gajendra asked the demigods. Rather, he recognizes that the whole creation is coming from the seeds that Krishna planted, that none other than Krishna is the seed-giving father of all living beings. And therefore, it is to Krishna, Krishna exclusively, Krishna only, to whom Gajendra plucks and offers the lotus flower and asks for protection. And Krishna derives so much transcendental pleasure. Hearing the elegant words of the elephant, Krishna steered Guru to the spot, and he sheared with his chakra the crocodile's head from his body. He saves his devotee. Not materially already, Gajendra has qualified his prayers. I no longer am asking you to rescue me from this elephant's body, but I'm asking you to rescue my mentality from the crocodile of this material world. So in the same way that the Lord revived the cowherd boys, saved them, and brought them back out of the belly of Aghasura, while at the same time killing the Aghasura demon, Krishna is also reaching down into that lotus-filled lake where the crocodile is about to triumph, achieve victory over his devotee. He's wresting Gajendra from the clutches of death, from the clutches of ignorance. He's extracting him from that lake, from the jaws of the crocodile. He's, with his chakras, killing the crocodile of ignorance and bringing, so to speak, the soul of Gajendra back to safety, back to shore, back to home, back to Godhead. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So let's see what we've got here in the sidebar for Facebook. Then we'll go touch bases with Rob, see if he's got some takeaways today. Brent, like a peacock going through just any door, we came to this earth because we wanted more. When we're content with the love that Krishna gives, we can go back home where Krishna lives. Yeah, it's funny. Everything's there in the spiritual world beyond what we can think and imagine. And yet, even though we can't imagine, we can't identify, we can't picture anything more than what's already in the spiritual world. We want more. We want more. We used to have a saying when I was a kid, the eyes are bigger than the stomach. You know, you'd go to your grandmother's house, there'd be a big Thanksgiving feast there. And with your eyes, you could consume all of it, but with your stomach, you could only consume a very small part of it. But the gusto with which you sit down, because of the eyes and the inner greed, you want to enjoy the whole feast. You want it exclusively for yourself. You want to put it all in your mouth, but it's not very long. It's not after 20 or 30 bites. That's no longer an ambition. You're starting to feel sluggish. You're starting to feel uncomfortable. So you give up that ambition in due course of time. So similarly, you know, why do we want more than what's available in the spiritual world? Because of unlimited greed. And until you check that greed and moderate that greed, you're not going to be compatible with the spiritual world. So we have to come to this material world, recognize our limitations over and over and over and over and over and over again, and finally come to a state of sobriety, an objective understanding of the spiritual world and the material world and the difference between the two, and then bring it around, turn the rudder, turn the ship around 180 degrees and go back to home, back to Godhead, where we didn't even realize we had it so good. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Britta says, poor silly peacocks. That's a good way of describing them. They're beautiful, but they're not the brightest intellects in the world. Brent offers here also. Let's see. Krishna is the start and the end, our eternal best friend. After we offer our praise, he reciprocates with his gaze. We begin in the darkness of ignorance and end up dead, unless we take to the path back to Godhead. Krishna is time and all things sublime. The ember of our soul remains eternal and bright if we once again make it to Krishna's sidelong sight. It's nice. It's nice. Krishna is the start and the end, our eternal best friend. As we offer our praise, he reciprocates with his gaze. We begin in the darkness of ignorance and end up dead, unless we take to the path back to Godhead. Krishna is time and all things sublime. The ember of our soul remains eternal and bright if we once again make it to Krishna's sidelong sight. Nice. Natasha, Hare Krishna. I know you have a lot of poetic power there. You're just kicking back today. Feel free to jump in whenever you want. Bye, Bobby. She's got a lot of emojis, llama emojis. We've had 5 llama births within the last as many days. There's a guy in Hawaii. He does a very good job of keeping cows. His name is Narayan Higgins. But he's a very unpleasant sort of a guy, abrasive guy. You know, he's always crowing about his project, which is successful, I'll grant you that. But then running down and trying to demean others. So he sent an email comment yesterday. He says, another llama born. He says, any cows or is this llama loca? I'm tired of his little shots across the bow. So I just blocked him. I just blocked him. It's nice to have a project, and I think what he's doing is great. But when you're as puffed up as that and as running people down constantly, trying to prove your superiority. I don't know. Seems like sooner or later there's going to be a reckoning. Pride comes before a fall. I do actually wish his Project West. He charges people $20 to go into his fields where his cows are lying, and they cuddle with the cows. It's very successful. People are lined up to cuddle with his cows. Brilliant idea. He successfully executed. But there are other good things going on in the world. He's not the only one. Prabhupada came for the human beings even more than the cows, or as much as the cows. Priya Krishna says, so happy to join today. Please accept my obeisances. Sundari Priya, glad to have you here as well. That's it. And then Rob, you have something for us today? Yes, no? No,
Sorry,
Rob?
Prabhuji, I couldn't get the unmute to work.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Prabhuji, I do have some today. Thank you very much for this class this morning. All right. There is no shame to forswear name, fame, and material gain. A devotee does not condone being shown Krishna alone.
What was that again? It distorted just a little bit there.
A devotee does not condone being shown Krishna alone.
Okay, right, right. Yeah, exactly. I understand. Mm-hmm.
Don't settle for being a mouse in Krishna's house. Krishna always wants his devotees, excuse me. Krishna always wants his devotees around, and to him, a devotee wants to be eternally bound.
Nice. Beautiful.
Just as a peacock forgets his steps, we become entangled in Maya's depths.
I like that. I just heard a peacock outside. It's a mating season, so they're calling day and night now. More? You have some
Krishna's
more?
glance, yeah, a couple more. Krishna's glance is the light that clears away the dark of night.
Beautiful.
And stop running helter skelter. At Krishna's feet, take shelter.
Nice. Thank you for all of that. So nice how everyone's putting their brains into gear, thinking and co-creating while we're speaking here. Very, very pleased by that. Well, this has been Transcendental Tuesday. It's a beautiful day outside here in Utah. Yeah, we will see you 23 hours from now for Wisdom Wednesday. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.